Good morning. Dr. Kissinger, Secretary Eagleberger, Dr. Hale Stork, distinguished guests, and members of the college community, welcome. We celebrate this morning the 308th anniversary of the granting of the Royal Charter that established the College of William and Mary in Virginia. This ceremony, I think, is the most important one we hold each year. I know some of you may argue with me on opening convocation or commencement. This is a quieter ceremony. Those others, our students first and last at the college, are marked by the excitement of new prospects at and beyond William and Mary. Charter Day, which comes in mid-year and in the darker days of February, is a more reflective event, a time for all members of the larger college community to meditate upon the college's history, its achievements, its challenges, and its profound duty to the world. Charter Day is our opportunity to rededicate ourselves to our mission, to prepare leaders who will guide our Commonwealth, our country, and the world toward their own, not toward their own self-interest, but according to the long-standing values that we here hold sacred. And this is a Charter Day more important than most because today we invest a new chancellor, former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. Under the watch of our last two chancellors, the job has become much more than an honorary one. The chancellor is the ambassador for the college, and more importantly, a model for our students in whatever their political affiliations might be, of leadership shaped by commitment not to a transitory political agenda, but to deeply held principles derived from years of deliberation and in the interest of the larger public good. As a reminder of our centuries-old mission, we traditionally begin Charter Day ceremony with selections from the documents that established the college and announced its creation. Our provost, Gillian Cell, will read from the ancient and royal charter of the College of William and Mary, and William O'Connell, Chessie Professor of Business and President of the Faculty Assembly, will read from the Royal Proclamation.
William and Mary, by the grace of God, of England, Scotland, France, and Ireland, King and Queen, defenders of the faith, and so forth. To all to whom these, our present letters, shall come, greetings. For as much as our well-beloved and trusty subjects, constituting the General Assembly of the Colony of Virginia, have had it in their minds, and have proposed to themselves, to the end that the Church of Virginia may be furnished with a seminary of ministers of the gospel, and that the youth may be piously educated in good letters and manners, and that the Christian faith may be propagated amongst the Western Indians to the glory of Almighty God, to make, found, and establish a certain place of universal study, or perpetual college of divinity, philosophy, languages, and other good arts and sciences, consisting of 1 president, 6 masters or professors, and 100 scholars, more or less, according to the ability of the said college. And the statutes of the same to be made, increased, diminished, or changed upon the place by certain trustees, nominated and elected by the General Assembly aforesaid. To wit, our trusty and well-beloved Francis Nicholson, our Lieutenant Governor in our colonies of Virginia and Maryland, William Cole, Ralph Wormley, William Byrd, and others, or the major part of them, or the longest livers of them, upon the south side of York River or elsewhere, where the General Assembly itself shall think more convenient within our colony of Virginia to be supported and maintained in all time coming. And for as much as our well-beloved and trusty the General Assembly of our colony of Virginia aforesaid has humbly supplicated us by our well-beloved in Christ, James Blair Clark, their agent duly constituted, that we would be pleased not only to grant our royal license to the said Francis Nicholson and others to make, found, erect, and establish the said college, but also to extend our bounty and beneficence toward the erection and foundation of the same, in such a way and manner as to us shall seem more expedient. We, taking these premises seriously into our consideration, and earnestly desiring that in as far as us lies, true philosophy and other good and liberal arts and sciences may be promoted, and that the orthodox Christian faith may be propagated, and being willing that forever hereafter there should be one such college or place of university study, and the said college should subsist and remain in all time coming. Of our special grace, certain knowledge and mere motion have granted and given leave, and by these presents do grant and give leave for us, our heirs and successors, as much as in us lies, to the said Francis Nicholson and others, that they may have power to erect, found, and establish a certain place of universal study or perpetual college for divinity, philosophy, languages, and other good arts and sciences, consisting of 1 president, 6 masters or professors, and 100 scholars, more or less. And further, we will, and for us, our heirs and successors, by these presents do grant, that when the said college shall be erected, made, founded, and established, it shall be called and denominated forever the College of William and Mary in Virginia, and that the president and masters or professors shall forever be called and denominated the president and masters or professors of the College of William and Mary in Virginia. In testimony whereof, we have caused these our letters to be made patent. Witness ourselves at Westminster the 8th day of February in the 4th year of our reign, by a writ of the Privy Seal, Pigot.
Trusty and well-beloved, we greet you well. Whereas we have thought fit that all due encouragement be given to the College of William and Mary, lately founded in our town of Williamsburg in Virginia, for promoting religion and learning in those parts, we do therefore earnestly recommend the same to you, willing and requiring you to do whatever lies in you for the due encouraging of the said college, and in particular that you call upon the persons that have promised to contribute toward the maintenance of the said college to pay in forthwith their several contributions, to the end so good and pious a work may be carried on for all the general benefit of that country. And so we bid you farewell, given at our court at Hampton Court, the 30th day of December, 1700, in the 12th year of our reign, by His Majesty's command, Vernon.
In granting the royal charter, William III and Mary II appointed the first chancellor of the college, the Right Reverend Henry Compton, Bishop of London. From 1693 until the Virginia Resolution for Independence, and then the Declaration of Independence in 1776, 13 Englishmen served in the post. Although the chancellor was nominally the temporal and spiritual head of the college, and above the president in rank, he still is, the distance between Virginia and London made the chancellor's most important role that of intercessor for the college with the British government. Following the Revolution, the Board of Visitors decided to reestablish the post, but, of course, without ties to England, and in 1788 named George Washington the first American chancellor. Since then, the college's chancellors have included 2 former presidents of William and Mary, a governor of Virginia, and the 10th president of the United States, John Tyler. From 1974 until 1986, the college had no chancellor, until the Board of Visitors appointed former Chief Justice of the United States, Warren E. Burger. He was succeeded, as we all know, by the first British citizen to hold that post since the Revolution, Margaret, the Lady Thatcher, the former Prime Minister of Great Britain. We have indeed been fortunate that such important political leaders have recognized the tremendous contributions they might make to this relatively small college. And if I may have seemed slightly brash in asking the likes of Lady Thatcher and Dr. Kissinger to consider the position of the Chancellor of William and Mary, well, I can only say that great consequences sometimes come of great aspirations, and our good fortune continues. I will now ask Dr. Kissinger and the rector of the college, Ed Grimsley, to step forward for the investiture. Gentlemen.
King William and Queen Mary empowered the Board of Visitors to select, in the words of the charter, quote, one eminent and discreet person, end quote, to be the chief advocate of the college in England. The scope of your responsibilities has grown tremendously over the centuries. The voyage to England now takes hours instead of months, one sign of a world that is at once much smaller and yet much more complex, a world that you will help us to better understand as we determine this college's role and responsibilities for the coming century. As symbols of your position, you are wearing a robe, a gift to former members of the Board of Visitors, and made in London by a firm founded during the reign of William and Mary. And you are wearing a badge suspended from the chain of office, created in 1987 as a gift of the Society of the Alumni. The badge displays the college coat of arms granted by London's College of Arms in 1694. The chain features insignia representing the history of the chancellorship, the crossed swords from the arms of the Bishop of London, the cross from the arms of the Archbishop of Canterbury, the eagle, a crest detail from the family arms of George Washington, the lion, detail from the family arms of John Tyler, the arms of the London Company, representing the colonial arms of Virginia, and finally the contemporary seal, Great Seal of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Dr. Kissinger, by the authority vested in me by the Board of Visitors and by the ancient charter of the College of William and Mary, I hereby declare your investiture complete. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the college's 22nd Chancellor, Dr. Henry Kissinger.
Many of you have witnessed some remarkable changes at William and Mary over the past 20 years. One of the most important, I think, being the development of a much more international focus, both in our curriculum and in the opportunities we offer to our students. Lady Thatcher oversaw the expansion of the college's horizon beyond Virginia and the United States, and most especially through the initiatives at the Reeves Center. And so it seems to me particularly fitting that her successor be a man who helped shape United States foreign policy during this country's difficult ascension to the status of international superpower. He is a man who helped resolve the Cold War, who opened diplomatic channels to the People's Republic of China, and who worked to improve Arab-Israeli relations. His expertise in world affairs, his talent for diplomacy will be invaluable to William and Mary in these important years ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome the former Secretary of State? Ladies and gentlemen, ladies Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, there are a lot more people here who want to hear this message and respect this occasion than don't. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very grateful for your help. That's not William and Mary, you are. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a real William and Mary welcome to the 22nd Chancellor of the College of William and Mary.
Thank you very much. Thank you. President Sullivan, members of the Board of Visitors, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this very warm, very friendly welcome. I was told that you do that for all your chancellors. It is impossible to follow so distinguished a chancellor as my friend, Lady Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher had an unbelievable ability to get to the heart of a problem. I once called on her at 10 Downing Street, and she said, "I understand you want to talk to me about Latin America. What is it you want to talk about?" I said, "I'd like to talk about the Latin American debt problem." Lady Thatcher said, "When you borrow money, you pay it back." That's the only debt problem I know anything about. So it is a great privilege for me to be here at the second oldest university in this country, On an occasion when such distinguished people as Larry Eagleburger and Adolphus Haysturg are granted honorary degrees. And I look forward to my service here as Chancellor. Therefore, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the perspective by which foreign policy is conducted. I have been a professor, and I've been a policymaker. And therefore, I have seen something of the perspectives of each of these groups. And there is a huge difference between these perspectives from some points of view. As a professor, you can pick your subject. You can work on it for as long as you wish. You're responsible only to your best judgment and the judgment of your friend, and you have the possibility of changing your mind and saying, I'll go to the library and write another book. As a policymaker, the problems are imposed on you. You cannot choose your subject. And the most overwhelming experience for all of us who have been in policy-making jobs is that there is always more to do on any given day than you can possibly accomplish. And so one of the necessities of a policymaker is to choose among the plethora of events that bear in on him those which most urgently need attention. And he has to make sure in that process that he does not neglect what is important for what is urgent. As a policymaker, you're responsible not only for the best that can happen, but also for the worst that can happen. There are some experiments you cannot try, not because you would not like the outcome, but because you cannot accept the consequences if you turn out to be wrong. So you do not have the option of doing it over again. You cannot say, I'll go to the library and write another book. And those are elements to keep in mind when you judge the actions of any policymaker in any administration. A policymaker has to strike a balance between his values and his necessities. Any American president, in any administration, and any prime minister in any country has to start with the fundamental requirements of the security of his country. That is the irreducible condition he has to keep in mind. The impact of his action on the perception of others. As a professor, as a philosopher, one has a duty to think of absolute values. And those values are, of course, as values not dependent upon circumstances. But as a policymaker, one always has to understand that one is living in a world of many societies, many with different approaches. And a policymaker, on the whole, must approach his goals in stages. And each stage may be imperfect. Nevertheless, the great presidents and the great leaders in the world have been men with strong moral convictions. They might not have been able to translate their convictions into outcomes in one term in office, or maybe even in one lifetime. But the decisions that policymakers at high levels have to make are always very closely balanced. The easy decisions get made at lower levels. At high levels, the pros and cons are 51 to 49, and usually even narrower. And that is a passage one can navigate only by strong moral convictions, even when they don't translate immediately into the ultimate goals. And so in our national debate, there is a need for a greater understanding of both sides of each other. And one reason why I'm happy to be here is to do what I can in a limited way to contribute to this discussion. Now, we in America are in a very special circumstance. We in America represent a country that has never had a powerful neighbor. We represent a country that was populated in its vast majority by immigrants. And being an immigrant myself, I know that the meaning of America for people like this is different from that of what most other nations have of themselves. For the greatest part of our history, we had two major attributes. One, we could afford to separate ourselves from the rest of the world and engage ourselves only in case of overwhelming danger, and then retreat back into our country. And secondly, we believed, and correctly, that our values were important and relevant to all the rest of the world. But for the greater part of our history, we also thought that the implementation of these values was not something we should fight for by military means unless American national security was involved. In 1823, John Quincy Adams said the following: "Wherever the standard of freedom and independence has been or shall be unfurled, there will be America's heart, her benedictions, and her prayers. But she goes not abroad in search of monsters to destroy. She is the well-wisher to the freedom and independence of all. She is the champion and vindicator only of her own. She will recommend the general cause by the countenance of her voice and by the benignant sympathy of her example. She well knows that by once enlisting under other banners than her own, she would envelop herself beyond the powers of extrication." This is one of the challenges of our time. The United States will always stand for freedom and democracy, and the United States must support it with economic and other measures. But the United States has to be careful about engaging itself in military operations in countries in which we cannot define what the outcome is, and in which we then become involved in passions that are not relevant to our national security. This was one of the debates in recent years over various trouble spots around the world. And it's especially important because as we look around the world today, we see a great many problems of a different varieties. We have been brought up to believe that every problem in every part of the world responds to similar actions. But the fact is that when we look around the world today, we see at least 4 different kinds of worlds. We see the world of the North Atlantic and the Western Hemisphere, where there are democracies, market economics, and where the principles of American democracy can be applied quite literally. Then there's the world of Asia, in which the nations deal with each other very similarly to the nations of Europe in the 19th century, with some emphasis on the balance of power, with some concern for each other's strategic actions. It is the area where there is, in fact, an increase in armaments. And it requires a different kind of understanding by the United States, more similar to what Britain had to do in the 19th and 20th century. Then there's the world of the Middle East, which is more similar to the Europe of the 17th century, of religious wars and ideological conflicts. And finally, there is a world like Africa, which is really an appeal to the human conscience. There are no conflicts that affect the security of major powers, only the well-being of the local populations. And it's an area where a globalized approach by all the nations of the world to improve conditions is extraordinarily important. So America today faces these different worlds. And we are the one country that has an impact in all these regions simultaneously. In our history, every problem we have recognized has had a solution. In this world that I've described, we are engaged in a permanent process. And those of you who study international affairs, and those of you who are concerned with foreign policy, should understand that we have a national obligation to have a perspective of the future. But you cannot have a perspective of the future if you do not respect your past. And therefore, we have to transcend these bitter disputes of recent decades in which vested interests get developed in undermining the confidence of America in itself. I have a Chinese acquaintance who claims that there is the following proverb. I say he claims this because I'm not sure there are as many proverbs as the Chinese tell us. The proverb goes like this: when there is turmoil under the heavens, little problems are dealt with as if they were big problems. And big problems are not dealt with at all. When there is order under the heavens, big problems are reduced to little problems. And little problems should not obsess us. What our national task is to make sure that we deal with the big and not with the little problems. That we reduce the big problems to little problems. That is our task. It is our opportunity. And to be able to make whatever small contribution we can make to it together, it is an honor to be here as your Chancellor. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chancellor, thank you for the honor of being our Chancellor. The year was 1923, Munich, Germany. A disgruntled World War I veteran preaches a gospel of racial hatred and extreme nationalism, organizes a few hundred malcontents into a ragtag army, and launches his ominous goose step toward infamy. The very same year, 1923, in a small town less than 100 miles from Munich, a son is born to a middle-class Jewish family. Ignorant of the grim realities looming just a decade in the future, the family celebrated the birth with the hope and the joy that always attend the beginning of a new life and a new generation. Knowing, as we do today, knowing what lies ahead, knowing the burning synagogues, the starving ghettos, the packed boxcars winding slowly toward Auschwitz, Birkenau, Treblinka, knowing all this, what odds would we now assign to the survival of that young boy born in Germany in 1923? What degree of probability, or more accurately, what measure of improbability would we calculate for the chance that he would be able to make his way to the United States, serve in the American Army, and survive the Battle of the Bulge? That he would earn a doctorate at Harvard University and would become a distinguished professor of foreign affairs, and brilliantly convert theory into practice as one of the ablest American secretaries of state in the last century? Could we have imagined that he would ultimately win the Nobel Prize? Could we have anticipated this moment when this singular statesman would join a long line of distinguished chancellors of the College of William and Mary, a group including the first President of the United States, the Chief Justice of the United States, and one of the most brilliant prime ministers in the history of Great Britain? Mr. Chancellor, I say again, we are honored by your service, and we welcome you to William and Mary. Clearly, the odds against our Chancellor's remarkable life journey were long, incalculably long. But while it may be useful to ponder briefly such imponderables, it is, I think, ultimately more rewarding to consider the lessons that we should draw from his life and his work. I say this because clearly Dr. Kissinger's achievements have more to do with character than with chance. And who, may we wonder, helped shape that character? Our Chancellor, I am sure, owes a great deal to the influence of his father, Louis, a schoolmaster, and his mother, Paula, who was fiercely dedicated to the welfare of her children. In the end, I suspect those seeking an insight into our Chancellor's remarkable life would be wise to weigh carefully the deep debt he owes to his mother and to his father. Whatever the explanation, we do know that Dr. Kissinger developed both courage and character, qualities that led him from the depths of Nazi Germany to the heights of the Nobel Peace Prize. And so his life provides a powerful case study of the value, the rewards, and yes, the hazards of leadership in the modern world. Our new Chancellor is a complex man. His historic achievements reflect that complexity. When Robert Bolt, in his wonderful play, Man for All Seasons, has Sir Thomas More say, God made man to serve him wittily in the tangle of his mind, surely he must have had someone very much like Henry Kissinger in mind. With complexity inevitably comes controversy. So certainly it has been in the life of our Chancellor. To my mind, the controversy he inspires owes much to his courage and to the explosive complexity of the world with which he contended and the events he sought to shape. Never has he been afraid to ask uncomfortable questions. Never has he failed to embrace the unconventional when the unconventional promised good for our country's cause. Some examples. Do you remember the skepticism that greeted his idea that an era of détente could replace decades of confrontation with the Soviet Union? Do you recall our surprise when our Chancellor's shuttle diplomacy first gave us hope that war in the Middle East might not have to be a permanent state of affairs, if only the promise of his hopes had ended in triumph rather than tears? Do you remember our shocked amazement when we learned that the United States dared to open a dialogue with the world's most populous communist country? Or our doubts when he first suggested that American interests might, just might, sometimes coincide with those of 1.2 billion Chinese. Now today, the orthodoxy of these ideas is so deeply ingrained that I think most of us have forgotten how profoundly once they startled us. We no longer remember. Indeed, many of you who are younger never knew that the opening to China and détente with the Soviet Union were such dramatic propositions that they shook half-formed notions once blindly accepted as immutable truths. Leadership like this, inevitably strikes sparks because it challenges the limits of what seems acceptable, and it forces us to face uncomfortable truths. But such leadership can and does lift a people, a nation, to a better place, and as Dr. Kissinger showed, it can advance what remains our most important mission, the search for world peace. James McGregor Burns, that scholar of exceptional distinction, has a name for such leadership. He calls it transformational. Transformational leaders like Abraham Lincoln, Franklin Roosevelt, Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, force us to examine critically what is, and they challenge us always to imagine what could be. This willed act of transformational imagination, both rare and powerful, invites us to envision a future about which we only dream and offers hope that our dreams may indeed come true. But Professor Burns also tells us that there is another and a much more common kind of leadership. He calls this leadership transactional. Transactional leaders never challenge those whom they aspire to lead. Their stock in trade is the promise of something for nothing. The details of the deal change from age to age, but the deal is always a sucker's game, fueled by cynicism and certain to end in tears, because the promise that sounds too good to be true always is. Transactional leaders do not really lead, they manipulate. And our political landscape is littered with transactional leaders, women and men, Democrats and Republicans, office holders at every level, who are skilled at telling us not what we need to know, but what we want to hear. And sadly, they never understand that the bubble popularity, which is the object of their relentless ambition, is really important to no one but themselves. Little wonder, then, that a recent survey found that political engagement among first-year college students nationwide is at an all-time low. As a university president, I can testify from personal experience that students have an infallible ability to detect chicanery, and our politics has given them abundant opportunities to hone that skill. The result, of course, is the dangerous political alienation of so many of the best of our nation's young people. Even as I hope few of us here today share this sense of alienation, I know that many of you share my concerns about the state of our civic soul. Over the past year, William & Mary completed the most sweeping survey of its constituents ever undertaken. Through this effort, which we called William & Mary 2010, we asked you how our college might best prepare its students for lives of leadership in a new world of fantastic complexity and of rapid change. And so many of you responded, as I hoped you would, with passion, with wisdom, and with powerful new ideas. But you also expressed concern. Listen to the reflections of a member of the class of 1990. We seem to have forgotten, she writes, that this great country in which we live is composed of we the people, not I the person. We seem to have lost sight of the fact that each person has a responsibility to contribute to the greater good. This is where the college can make a difference. Historically, true leaders have emerged from institutions such as William & Mary, and I believe, she concluded, that the essence of leadership should be part of the liberal arts tradition. Think of those phrases, the essence of leadership, part of the liberal arts education. Do we not all agree that they are important? And yet, does not the very scarcity of real leaders, leaders of the transformational kind, does not their scarcity fuel our conviction that an indispensable part of William & Mary's purpose must be the education of great leaders, of true leaders? I promise you that in the decade ahead, our college will not merely continue, but redouble its effort to educate graduates who understand the meaning of civil responsibility, who delight in questioning conventional wisdom, and who are marked by an unshakable commitment to the public good. To educate leaders of that kind, we must teach our students these three things. First, there can be no substitute for intellectual rigor. We educate the best. That is the vocation to which this place was called, and we make no apology for it. Our obligation, our calling, is to teach the lessons of global citizenship to students whose destiny is to be global leaders. Second, we must teach our students, every one, the life-giving glory of hearts attuned to what Wordsworth called the still, sad music of humanity. Although the din of daily life mostly drowns out this haunting melody, the needs of others, less lucky than ourselves, command our permanent engagement in building a better and a more decent world. Third, we must ask our students to hazard the risks of leadership, to speak with strong and with reasoned voices in the great debates that will certainly animate the age of their maturity. So much that is wrong with the way we live now is attributable to the inexplicable, to the shameful silence of those best equipped to speak truth to power, to call out the moral cowards who abuse their public trust in the service of private ambition. We must invite our students to follow the example of our chancellor. We must teach them to ask uncomfortable questions, and all of us must be willing to show the way. Nearly 200 years ago, President-elect Thomas Jefferson vividly demonstrated the value of asking challenging questions at critical times. On a rainy morning, March 4th, 1801, Jefferson left the modest Washington rooming house and began a short journey to his inauguration, the first to be held in our nation's capital. Unlike George Washington and John Adams, he carried no sword. He wore no badge of office. Dressed in the plain black clothes of an ordinary citizen, Jefferson walked through muddy streets rather than ride in a splendid coach. When he reached the Capitol, the President-elect was greeted by his fellow William and Mary alumnus and his lifelong antagonist, Chief Justice John Marshall, who with little to do administered the oath of office in the old Senate chamber, which at that time was the only completed portion of the building. Just as the Capitol, our nation was then unfinished, and Jefferson faced a daunting task of leadership. His election had been fractious, so much so that outgoing President Adams had left Washington at 4 o'clock that morning rather than bless the transfer of power by witnessing the inauguration of his then bitter political foe. To reassure a divided nation, Jefferson spoke graciously to those who had not voted for him. Every difference of opinion, he famously said, is not a difference of principle. We are Republicans, we are all Federalists. Not entirely satisfied with these comforting words, however, Jefferson went on to ask one of those questions with the power to illumine a moment and to inspire a nation. Sometimes, Jefferson observed, sometimes it is said that man cannot be trusted with the government of himself. Can he then be trusted with the government of others? By his leadership, Thomas Jefferson answered that question affirmatively. But he could answer it only for his time, for his place, for his generation. The truth is, my friends, each generation must face that question anew. And now it is our turn. Can we be trusted with the government of others? Here at William and Mary, I say that the answer is yes. Yes. We teach now, we always have, we always will, what it means to live a life of service, of honor, of moral and intellectual leadership. In that pursuit, we remain proudly unfashionable. I believe, with the late Judge Learned Hand, the only America you can love is the one whose citizens have learned self-discipline in the face of truth. The only country any man has a right to love is one where there is a balanced judgment, justice founded on wisdom, and a temperate mind. Is not Judge Hand's powerful definition of patriotism reason enough both to swear anew allegiance to the America envisioned by our founders and to work for its preservation here at the College of William and Mary, where the dream of America, which became in time the American dream, came first to life? Thank you.